Well, it has lots of different modalities so that people have choices. And that doesn't mean that we spend all of our money on transit, but it does mean that we spend a significant fraction of money trying to build up other alternatives that actually work. But it also means we solve some of the big structural issues like the 520 bridge, which in the last 6 years, after a decade of having the east side and Seattle sort of spit across the lake at each other, we've made incremental progress every year on that. I think that's an important thing.
Sorry, 1 second. This is a 2-minute question.
Oh, it is 2 minutes.
Wow. I gotta talk much faster. We made progress on the viaduct replacement, finally. I think that was great. It was great to see the city and the county and the governor agree on that. We were able to move forward on that. We're going to have to work all the issues around the box, about the tolling policy on that. Those are crucial because without having 520 fixed, you don't have a functioning transit system. I think you have to look at the coordination of transit between Sound Transit and Metro. And I think you have to ask the question of why are they so separate? I think there's some reasons to have different prioritization settings, but I think that you could coordinate a lot of things so that when you got off of one mode, when you got off of ferry, there was a bus ready. When you got off the train, there was a bus ready for you, so that we synchronized all that stuff. So having a system that actually works and that's scaled for the arrival of people in the future and not for 5 years ago, I think is actually pretty important to do. We're going to have to figure out how to get past some of the not in my backyard issues around both transit and around trying to fix the highway system to make the whole system work better.
We'll just go right down the line here.
The transportation we choose to invest in determines the land use that your children and your great-grandchildren will live with. We see that here in West Seattle. The trolley system that our ancestors built created End-A-Line right down here at the end of the line. And many of the other wonderful neighborhood centers that we have now. The freeway system that was built starting with my grandparents' generation created a very different land use, one that we're scrambling to figure out how to serve with transportation and other infrastructure. We need to focus on building a transportation system that's going to create sustainable communities. That's why I so enthusiastically came out and supported going back to the ballot with Sound Transit, with light rail after the bitter defeat of the first Proposition 1. That proposition had some important road fixes in it, like replacing the South Park Bridge, which I worked very hard for. But getting that light rail, getting that passed, is going to lay down the framework for communities that are going to be sustainable for decades and centuries to come. Now, with regard to the bus system, I think that we do need to work on more coordination. I disagree, though, that you can divorce the decisions about where the money's spent, where the service goes, from the decisions about how to raise the money. And that means that merging bus systems across the region, the time is not yet ripe for that. Because the people in Seattle and King County are willing to pay to have more bus service. And the farther away you get, the less that will exists. If we want to improve our transit, I want us to be free to do that.
The most effective transportation system that we can possibly have is to give people choices. And we are on the cusp of finally realizing that after 40 years of being highway dependent and making sure everybody had to have a car to get anywhere. On July 18th, we're going to open light rail from downtown to Tukwila, and shortly thereafter, we'll have the last segment of the initial segment out to the airport. We have now kicked off U-Link, and we're going to start building from downtown to Capitol Hill and out to the university. And with the Sound Transit to approval by you, the voters, as I said earlier, we'll expand that system north to Linwood, east to Bellevue, and south to Federal Way. We're going to have a mobility revolution starting with heavy rail on Sounder and light rail, as I've discussed. But we also need to take a look at how we can improve our regional trail system. Many, many people today are actually using their bikes to get to and from work, not just for recreational purposes. We also have to take a look, yes, at a ferry district, which is going to provide people options to get around this region because of our water situation, our geography, to allow people to get to and from work using a variety of means. That's in our future. That's coming our way as long as we stay the course, as long as we make sure that that happens. Many other places in the world have these choices. People get to and from work with dispatch Employers can make sure that they're there in time. Employees can make sure that they get home to spend their evenings with their families because they have those choices and they're not dependent on a highway system that can't possibly assume the kind of growth we're going to have in the future. Last thing, though, is we have to be more than transportation agencies. I've stressed this over and over at Sound Transit. We're not just a transit agency. Those stations need to be hubs for redevelopment that are quality places to live. And as we build those out, that allows for a blueprint for other cities to say, hey, we can redevelop too, we can have density, quality urban environments, and make that happen over time. So those choices are good for transit and transportation. They are also good for the redevelopment inside the urban core for quality neighborhoods.
I'm impressed. Everybody seems to solve the transportation problem in 2 minutes. I don't know that I can do that. I actually think we made some pretty good progress. Over the last few years, we've enacted 2 gas tax increases. We're going to put about $5 billion worth of new highway transportation investment into the state. About 2.5 to 3 of that is going to be in South Puget Sound and King County. We've made a decision to build an additional 2 lines for Sound Transit, so we will have transit rail in place. So when you look at how much capital investment that we can make, I think we're doing pretty well. The problem is we're doing it all in silos. Each one of those is thought through as a highway investment or as a Sound Transit investment or as a rail investment. And Norm Rice and John Stanton had a report about 2 years ago now. And the gist of the report was that we needed to look at the governance of the transportation system. And my criticism of the report was that they had a really good description of what the current system looked like. They had a very weak discussion of what the problem was, and they had a very clear understanding of what the change for governance is. And I think that's something that's common in these kinds of discussions. When you actually look at where the problems in our transportation system are, they relate to how do you get from one mode to the other? How do you get seamless transportation? Ross mentioned, how do you get from a ferry to a bus? When Metro has the responsibility for running the buses and DOT does the ferries. I think there's a lot more that can be done, and I think that using the PSRC and Puget Sound Regional Council as an integrator and providing it with leadership from the county executive level to be able to make investments in ways that are performance-oriented rather than politically oriented. And I'll give one example of that, and that's specific to Metro, and that's our 20-40-40 allocation of bus service. I don't know how many of you
So we're out of time, unfortunately.
can do this in 2 minutes.